The history of Black colleges and universities in America, which has educated the architects of freedom movements and cultivated leaders in every field. Tell Them We Are Rising, the story of historically Black colleges and universities, is a documentary that up for review tonight, directed by Marco Williams and the great Stanley Nelson Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And it was our guest, Stephanye Watts of the Be Real Black Cinema Club's selection for this, our final stop of Doc to School in September. Stephanie, what say you of Tell Them We Are Rising?
It's the best documentary. Well, actually, the only documentary I've ever seen about HBCUs, and it's so well done because it tracks from the founding, which I don't want y'all to fight in the comments, but we're going to say that Cheney is the first HBCU, 1837.
Mm-hmm.
But some people like to tussle, so I didn't go there. I'm mind my business through the 90s, which was like seen as kind of like the peak of HBCUs, even though I feel like we're having a renaissance right now. But yeah, and it just really connects the dots. And it I think for a lot of people in contemporary times, they see HBCUs as like just some place to hang out. You know, they see it as like, oh, they're party schools, or everybody that goes there is bougie or whatever. And I think the film really talks about, as the log line or whatever says, that like HBCU alumni are really the architects of like African America in so many ways. Like, you're going to find alum in everything that you do. So there was this controversy online around Kamala saying, well, HBCU don't do nothing for Black people. And I'm like, HBCU alum are your teachers, they your social workers, they are your doctors, your nurses, you know. So it's like every faction of Black life in this country is touched by HBCUs. And yeah, I don't know. I'm proud to be part of that legacy. Both my parents was at HBCUs. All of my cousins, we all went to HBCUs. I was at Clark. My 3 boy cousins were at Morehouse. We're all the same age, so we started together and sort of ended together.
That's how it happens.
You know, all my inner circle of friends from high school went to HBCUs. The friends that I made in New York, like my inner circle of friends, they all went to HBCUs. So, you know, I just was like, let's do it. And also, homecoming season is around the corner. So right. October is homecoming season. So I just thought it would be really good to talk about this film.
So I'm curious, because this the documentary definitely does dig deep into the history of not only just the history of the colleges and universities themselves, but actually the history of the thirst for knowledge and education of Black people, you know, as they are, you know, quote unquote, Americanized, you know, and I'm curious of how much of that history, which I will say this documentary tells with some absolutely beautiful, breathtaking archival footage.
There it is.
You know, of photos of, you know, of the freed Black people, people just thirsty for knowledge, you know, reading books, you know, how much of that is a part of the experience of going to an HBCU?
I think it's still a huge part of it. Like, the most embarrassing thing that can happen to you on an HBCU campus is to not have good grades. Like, your social standing tumbles with your grades. Really? Like, so, you know, it's very much about, like, we used to say on point. You're like, oh, she not on point. Wow, we can't be fooled. We can't be seen with her because she ain't on point. You know, and so I think that thirst for knowledge, that thirst to uplift our people in a real way is still something that exists on HBCU campuses. And I think that also, which people don't realize, majority of the people that are going to HBCUs, even now, are first generation. They might be the first person in their family to go to college. And so this is a big moment, not just for the student that's on the yard, but their family back home is so proud of them to get them to this point. So, you know, even though we're talking about 1830s when, you know, slavery is still happening in this country. People are getting an education. That same thirst, that same like, I want to be something still exists now in 2024. You know, I was just on a yard last week with my mentee, and I'm like, man, like I still see it, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think to kind of pick up what you said with the footage, I think what impressed me just as a documentary is how well done it is. And, you know, what I put in my notes is you can tell this is a PBS.
Yes, it is a PBS documentary.
A PBS documentary because, again, the just the sheer volume of historical footage, of as you said, the photographs. I love the fact that it's historian after historian after historian. And for me, the grounding in history, in a lot of ways elevated it into something that you know, I think it's one thing to kind of talk about a subject and, you know, okay, well, these are HBCUs, this is when they were founded, so on and so forth. But I love the fact that it put Black education within the framework of this is something that racist white America saw as dangerous. Like Black people learning something is dangerous. And this goes back to slavery, where, you know, it was illegal for an enslaved person to learn how to read. And the fact that they spent time with that before they roll into formal education. I love the fact that they talked about the dynamic of HBCUs and just how dangerous it was initially. And you know, all of the arson and terrorism and lynching and murder that was connected to it. And you know, I knew some of that, but you know, to have it all in one place, and the, you know, one of the things that I learned that I thought was amazing, again, why you get historians involved, there's a detail where they talk about you know, the man who began Hampton when it was Hampton Institute.
Yes.
And you know, racist guy who just thought Black people were incapable of any type of anything besides servitude.
Right.
And he kind of starts it to train Black people to be better servants.
Yeah, right.
And then Booker T. Washington, who is his prized pupil, goes and to Tuskegee.
And kind of Institute.
You know, and
mirrors that.
It mirrors that. But what I was saying is, by selling this Black education initially as, well, we're going to make better trained servants, it kind of gave us a little breathing space. Because again, there was this very active movement to destroy our places of education. Like, they did not want us educated. They did not want us. And I love the fact that this is articulated. Like, you know, I think we talk a lot now to you know, talking about this resurgence in HBCUs now, this and the other. But I think we have a lot of conversation about Black people receiving education, and it's and the type of quality of education we receive, and how open we are to education, and what happens with our kids, and you know, going into college. But it's still a lot of like it really is very American, to be resistant to Black education, which means that Black education is intrinsically radical. And I love that part of it. Like, I think this was a celebration of Black schools, as well it should have been. I think it was an acknowledgement of the resilience and everything, and certainly just learning in and of itself is a beautiful thing. But I love the fact that it is very well articulated throughout this, that Black learning is dangerous. And that was my favorite part, along with, again, just that the level of quality with the footage and everything.
It's interesting you brought up about Booker T. Washington. This documentary touches on the tension that existed between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, because of Booker T's,
who also was a professor at Clark Atlanta University. It was Atlanta University then.
Okay, all right.
I'm always gonna bring my school up.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That is fine. But I'm telling you right now, one more time, and Vince is going to say we need a check. But
you know what? We don't. We don't. You know, I let the kids go to school. So
that's true. That's true. But I like that it when they talk about that tension between the two, because Booker T. Washington starts the Tuskegee Institute, and you talked about, and the documentary points out about how he, purposefully, mirrors what is happening at Hampton Institute in the Tuskegee Institute, as far as having teaching the students about trades, trades first, right? And that's how he's even marketing the Tuskegee Institute, and the tension that W.E. Du Bois and other people at that time had with that, because it's like, no, we need to aspire to, higher forms of education so that we can actually be the doctors and the people that calls the shots, right? And there's nothing wrong with W.E. Du Bois's point of view about that. But because, W.E. Du Bois is someone who was so learned and so respected, it started to, even in Black people at that time, demonize Booker T. Washington a little bit, right?
Sure.
And it was interesting, just on Black History Year, the show I do with Push Black, we had a guest on there, Marlon Ross, and he was talking about how Booker T. Washington actually, on the low, was all about what everything that W.E. Du Bois was putting out. But he realized that I needed to have Tuskegee Institute set up in this way so that it would be passable for them. And he would now have a lane by which he could operate. And then he could then on the low funnel money and funnel resources so that other, initiatives could exist. Right. So, and unfortunately that is something that is not touched on in this documentary, but in this documentary from 2017, the Marlon Ross, the person that I talk about, his work came out in 2020. But it was interesting for me to see that, because both sides of the coin there's justification in both.
We need the learneds, as you say, and we need folks in the trades. We need us everywhere. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So that kind of tension was mostly exacerbated because people saw Booker T. Washington as somebody that was like willing to bow down to white people because of, I think it's 1865 or whenever he gave that like grand speech.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of just put a bad taste in people's mouth. They didn't want to hear nothing he had to say. Why are you asking Booker T about stuff?
Right.
But also I think what was really interesting is the difference between HBCUs that were founded by Black people and HBCUs that were founded by white people, and how they talk about that in the film. And to take it back to W.B. Du Bois, his daughter was at Fisk.
Yes.
And with this white president that was like, y'all dumb, y'all not nothing, whatever. And she wrote home and told W.B. Du Bois what was going on at Fisk.
Guess what?
And Fisk, of course, because he's W.B. Du Bois, you bring him to speak at the school. And he basically dragged the whole administration and was like, get these white people up out of here.
Well, I love the first line of his speech is, I have come here to criticize. And then he just goes to town. But I think, to your point, I think, again, I love how much they explored sort of the intra-collegiate dynamic in these HBCUs. To your point, there's this whole, and you see it now when you see, the tensions between alumni and the board and the student body and this, that, and the other, where it's almost like you teach these kids to be smart and independent. And when you teach a kid to be smart and independent, Well, they're smart and independent.
Absolutely.
Which means that they buck.
That's right.
And they push. And I love how, there was this moment where, as you said, all of the presidents of these colleges were white, but the student body was black. And again, especially after World War I, and you start moving into the Harlem Renaissance, the quote unquote new Negro
That's right.
is not having it. But again, you see it mirrored once you move into the civil rights era,
Right?
Where again, there's this push and pull. But I think that's sort of the tradition of Black college. I was on my wife went to Howard, and there's a moment in here where they talk about the Howard students taking over the administration building.
Yes.
And I teased my wife because they took over the administration building when she was there. And I was like, well, it's just tradition. Like the students protest, and sometimes you got to take over a building.
Oh, they ran down on administration 2 years ago when their dorms were getting flooded.
Look,
they had the tent city and everything in Howard.
I said, I love these rowdy ass kids. I love when student, because as they say on here, you're talking about what have HBCUs done for you. We get to sit in this room. We get to have the lives that we have, frankly, because of the civil rights movement that was started by these rowdy ass HBCU students.
Yeah.
So look.
And again, you're talking about things being dangerous. There are still bullet holes in buildings at North Carolina A&T and was the film talking about, was it
Southern University,
where 2 students were killed.
A story that you don't hear about.
Yeah, I didn't know about that story. I knew about
Kent State,
North Carolina A&T, but I didn't know about Southern, and that was crazy.
I could see a whole documentary about that.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
Well, and it's because these students were literally being attacked, murdered, attempted murder because of their radicalness. And I think a lot of people be like, again, HBCU students are so bougie and we're so this, but it's like, who was at them counters?
Well,
who was filling up SNCC?
The irony about what happened, so towards the end of the documentary, they spend a significant amount of time talking about something that happened at Southern in the 70s, and it ended
72,
up,
I think.
72, and it ended up with the National Guard being called in, and 2 students were shot and killed. But the impetus for the protests was that Southern is a public university in Louisiana, and they found out, which it's still, I think it's what's happening at Tennessee State. The state
School of Oprah Winfrey,
yes.
She is an HBCU alum, y'all.
Yes, she is. But the state was spending half as much money per student for the Black students than they were for the white students. And the students protested because, well, we deserve the money that our white counterparts are getting. But one thing Booker T. Washington was always adamant about, we got to control our finances. It's economics. And that was what, like you talked about how they didn't really show the complexity of Booker T. Washington. That was one part that I was like,
missed the opportunity.
I wish we'd have talked, especially again when the root of what happened at Southern was economics. So
yeah, I did like that they spend a little bit of a time with Thurgood Marshall. That was good to have his name lifted up again, the way that it was in Brown versus Education. It's beautiful.
Oh, the Howard Law School story is
iconic.
It really is. And certainly, if you know anyone who went to Howard Law School, you've heard the story. Look, I think tradition, heritage, pride, culture. You get this is all of it, and the thing that I really liked how it kind of ends in the current time, and as you said, I think we are going through a bit of a resurgence, but we have a generation or two now that we have been in fully integrated spaces, and they had a young woman who articulate, I was one of a few. I was the only, and there's so many of our kids who went, I was the only one. I was this, and this is a space where I don't have to be the only. This is a space where I can, be surrounded by people like me.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was this wonderful journey where you see the role that HBCUs play from the beginning to right now. Yeah.
There is a story that they share. They don't spend a whole lot of time on it, but it is on a couple that have been married for 68 years.
I know that's right.
That met.
Yes.
At a HBCU. He saw her, at admissions.
Look, man. Shoot your shot, young man.
Shot his shot.
Shoot your shot, young man.
He's still with her today. And it was a beautiful story of them together. But if I had to make one critique of this documentary, that would be it. Not the inclusion of that. I would have liked the historians you kind of need, especially in the history part, to give you the context of the history and the why. But I think that there could have been more space made for more of the personal stories,
sure,
to really see that journey, because that couple stands out, and then like you say, the last 10 minutes when we're now in the current time, which are more personal stories too, they'll stand out. But by then you're at the last 10 minutes of the film, and I think there were opportunities to lace in a little bit more of the personal, just to give. To make a little bit more of a story, of what this was. And my critique is that you said it. This is very much a PBS documentary, but it's a PBS documentary by the numbers. You get the historians, you get your talking heads. You've got your little caption logs. Beautiful archival footage. But when it dips into the personal stories here and there, that's when it starts to be a little bit different, and that's when it actually is its most interesting to me.
Yeah, I think it could have been a film in 4X, like When the Levees Broke, because it was so much that you don't get a chance to dive into. And I think the personal anecdotes are important because the film is really like prestige, legacy, history, but the small moments, like the couple, humanizes the HBCU experience, which I think it has this weird pedestal that it's on.
Absolutely.
But we just regular Black people. You know what I'm saying? That's from regular places. And I think that would have definitely lended to that part of the story if we were allowed to kind of humanize it a little bit more and have, I'm not saying it needs to be a 4-hour film, but you can do, 4 installments. It would have been really nice to see.
It's interesting. To your point, you get the sense that this is, as you said, it's got a sheen to it, and it really is. We are going to present this information in such a way to let you know. The development of the HBCU, its historical standing. So, again, it's historian, and then you get a split second with this couple. And I almost feel like when the documentary was made, 2017, they thought this was going to be it. Like, this is really this is the HBCU package and statement. And I think we're living in this moment, frankly, this kind of post Kamala Harris moment where HBCUs are really on this big stage where, really since, frankly, the Cosby Show and Different World, this is probably the most spotlight that HBCUs have gotten on a national stage.
I'll be honest, I would love for them to see them touch on that a little bit.
What Different World?
Yeah.
Well, again, that's sort of pop culture.
But how that did start a renaissance.
Yeah, it definitely did. Enrollment shot up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But again, I think they thought, okay, we're going to make the PBS
No, I understand, yeah.
almost, it's like a post Ken Burns.
The Ken Burns.
Right, it's the Ken Burns package. And this is the one we're going to get because, frankly, I don't know if we're going to be able to get funding to do another HBCU documentary.
Yeah.
So we got to make this prestige. And I think going forward, I think there'll be more again, I would love to do a documentary just on Southern. And what happened? Like I had never heard about that.
No,
like I didn't know that had happened at all. And it's an amazing. So, and it's funny talking about when the levees broke. And one of the things that blew my mind is all the people that participated. They have the governor, the guy who was governor at the time, and he is unapologetic.
Oh, absolutely. He don't give two.
Look, is crazy to me.
Yeah. That is a moment that stands out. It just makes you want more, right? It makes you want the oral history.
Well, I wanted to know that president of Southern who sold them out. Is he alive?
Yeah.
When did he die? What were the repercussions of this? But
but like you said, this is it's only like an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's a relatively short documentary.
It's short. It's they probably figure it's their one time at bat. It's 2017. We're now 2024. We're now in the streaming age. We're now with multiple outlets. Not saying that PBS was the only outlet then, but it's one of the few that probably could really pick up a documentary like that. Now, to what you're saying, you could do a four-part series. You could do a 5-part series on HBCUs, and you do history, and then you do one episode is all about Howard, then the history, and then one episode is all about Southern. You could just go from the moments to moments and do actually like Spike Lee did when the levees broke, do more of an oral history of it, personalize it more. You can then talk about the impact of different world school days, had on just the profile of HBCUs. You could spend more than 10 minutes on where they are now, right? What's going on now, because it's all roses, 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 and then when the film turns to color, it's like, whoa, what happened to that building?
Right.
Now there's graffiti all over the place. Whoa, where
but
we
Morris
at?
Brown is back, though. Morris Brown is back.
Very good.
Happy homecoming in advance to Morris Brown.
I mean, quite honestly, the dynamic in Atlanta, like what is...
That could be a documentary.
Well, I thought it was a lot of faults with the Freaknik documentary.
Yeah.
But I thought it did a really good job capturing the dynamic of Atlanta being a black college town.
Yeah.
Like there are obviously cities that have black colleges, but there are so many.
And we're all on the same campus.
All on the same, but how that informs, the city politics and the way things work. And, you can't show something and then not address it. And for them to, as you say, drop this really evocative image of Morris Brown and all of the challenges that Morris Brown has faced. But so many of those challenges are connected to being in Atlanta, which I love Atlanta and Wakanda, but Atlanta is always in Georgia. And, we talk about what happened with Southern, but it's a lot that goes with being a school in the state of Georgia.
Right. And it's a Morris Brown is black founded HBCU. So there's that other layer of bias against it. I think we're all talking about our dream HBCU documentaries. I would definitely love an AUC one. For anybody that's not familiar with the Atlanta University Center it's Clark Atlanta, Spelman, Morehouse, Morris Brown, ITC, which is a theological school, and then Morehouse School of Medicine. And we're all on one campus. We all share one library, and we just have different buildings for each school. Yeah. And you can cross-register all the schools, yada, yada, yada. But I would love a documentary around the diversity of HBCUs, because people think when you go to a black school, everybody's the same. I hear also, why you go to HBCU? Everybody the same. Baby, the most diverse place I've ever been in my life, and I lived in New York for 15 years. And there is still no place more diverse than HBCU. And I mean that in any way you can think of diversity. But one thing that I would love in my dream HBCU documentary would highlight is the classism that exists at HBCU. So it's like, we talk about, oh, you don't got to deal with racism, because everybody Black, but their classism hit different. And that was something that shook me when I got to my school, because I was, in Philly. Your dad could be a doctor, but you live in Germantown next to somebody whose mom might not work at all. You know what I mean? Yeah. And y'all both wind up at Morgan, and it's not a thing. But getting down to school and I'm meeting people whose parents' names is on the whatever the new building is that's being built. Because even though my family name is on the alumni house, but it's a 1-room shack. So, and it's my grandpa's family who we don't, know that well. But it's like you're going to school with people. Like when I was at Clark, our campus was open. So it was within the neighborhood and on our campus, in between our school buildings or people's houses. It was a church. And then between our main campus and where our gym was America's first housing project.
Wow. And
so we had to walk past the projects to get to the gym. And we would have a lot of events in the gym. So, we were passing this all the time. And I had classmates whose parents' names were on buildings. And then people who, went home to the projects after they left class.
Right.
And that was something I had just never experienced. And then to see the tensions between them.
I can imagine.
And then the tension between Spellhouse and Clark Atlanta was deep too. I had a class at Morehouse and this guy said to me, I don't know why you went to Clark. That's just not an elitist opportunity. And I was like, what?
Well.
And I was like, well, I don't want to be an elitist. So let's start there.
Well, the great thing about having Black people from all different walks of life and all different perspectives and all different everything is that all includes assholes.
So, absolutely. And we got a lot of that.
Well, you were talking about, a different way, like Gilbert Hall on Different World, Willie Gilbert's family. So, it is, I'm trying to look at the sunny side of things. Like, I love the fact that you have all of these different things and you don't have to say, oh, wow, that person is terrible. That means Black people are terrible. It's like, well, no, that person is terrible. And then you can kind of go and do your thing.
Yeah.
But you got it. Look, you got it all there.
With all that being said, would you, Stephanie, recommend that people watch Tell Them We Are Rising?
I forced this film on everybody. And every time I watch it, I cry at the same exact part. So, yes.
Which part? Is it when the Kendrick comes on?
It's not. Listen, it's like the first 10 minutes when they're talking and they said, oh, well, we're writing these letters to people in the North about, these HBCUs. And they said, well, what do you want people in the North to know about what we're doing down here? Yeah. And this young boy who goes on to be a president of HBCU later in his life, he says, tell them we are rising.
Tell them we are rising.
I'm like crying all over again. That part just takes me out because I told everybody on Instagram I was going to cry. It just takes me out because it's just like, you got to think about these are people who were literally enslaved just 2 years ago. Some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Where reading literally would get you killed and now you're in college. Tell them we are rising. Oh my God, that takes me out. Every time.
Vincent?
I would as well. Look, I think education is the most powerful weapon on earth. God knows I love a good book. God knows we just talk about different things and this, that, and other. But let's be clear. I am Black. And when you Black, you look, keep your blade sharp. Keep your blade sharp and keep your head on the swivel. And I honestly do believe there's nothing more powerful than education. And while, got to do the disclaimers, of course, I'm a huge proponent for formal education. I think any education that a Black person can get can be weaponized, and it needs to be weaponized. And again, as much as this documentary does have that PBS Ken Burns sheen to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like again, I love the fact that they foreground this reading of Black education, that, you know, I'm not doing this to get a job. I'm not doing this to philosophize and think about things, you know, something real abstract. This is the nicest way to say it is, this is a tool. It is utilitarian. But the way what we're really saying is this is a weapon. And in a moment where generally we are living in this anti-intellectual space, just as Americans, like this is, you know, it's this really weird moment where people are boast about not knowing things,
are happy to not know,
right? Which is confusing, I think, just generally. But as a Black person, I find it reckless,
yes,
and dangerous. I think this documentary is amazingly instructive. Perhaps your third grade class, they should show this.
Yeah.
Instead of
swap out
instead of
Soldier Story.
Listen, pretty much everybody that went to that school went to HBCUs. So.
I mean, I guess they did. They want Sergeant Waters to slit their throat.
I didn't even tell y'all in fourth grade they were showing us Emmett Till's body. That's a whole other thing. Miss PA, I'll never forget that teacher. I was like, girl, what is happening? Then they took us to the Great Blacks and Wax Museum, had us in that slave ship. It was a lot.
Oh my God.
But yes, I would indeed recommend.
It was wild times at Ivy Leaf Elementary and Middle School.
Gather the kids for recess. We're going to watch Roots.
We watched Queen, not Roots. But Queen was just as bad as Roots.
God's Negro.
Oh my God.
Shout out to Holly Berry.
Always shout out to Holly Berry.
God. Oh. You earned those tears, my dear. You earned those tears. But I will make it 3 for 3. Definitely recommend that you watch Tell Them We Are Rising, the story of Black colleges and universities. It is must see viewing. Right. And I see Miss Makiba had mentioned this is the part where I went to the PBS gift shop and bought the documentary. It's interesting. I was just having a conversation with someone about, you know, physical media again.
Absolutely.
Physical copy.
And wanting to, you know, like be a little bit more intentional in rebuilding my DVD collection. And this is definitely one that is worthy for the shelf. So there you go.
Can I say one more Clark Atlanta thing?
Absolutely. Look.
Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. You're gonna give them the address to the gift shop?
Listen, our school store is popping. They had a little denim, little crop top I need to get for homecoming. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to say and like why I got so emotional is because I just also think about the people who came before me, who walked through these same rooms as me. And I just get very overwhelmed because it's like, wow, I'm connected to this legacy of people. And so like, besides like W.B. Du Bois, who I'm like, he has like there's like a gold bust of his head right where Lawrence Fishburne says, wake up. Like now it's a thing of Du Bois. But also the writers and musicians that wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing also went to Clark Atlanta University. So even when we sing that song, I just be bawling my eyes out. And everyone's like, girl, what's wrong with you? But it's like, yo, like I'm connected to the people that wrote that song. And I think that's what it is about HBCUs. It's of course the education, but also the family that you're now like kind of connected to and you're a part of, that you can always lean on. It will always support you. So yes, my Clark Atlanta fact is James Weldon Johnson and his brother wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing and are graduates of Clark Atlanta University.
There you go. All right.